In recent days, a major announcement shook Brazil's agricultural sector. U.S. President Donald Trump introduced a new 50% tariff on all imports coming from Brazil. That's right. Starting August 1st, every product we send to the American market will face double the taxes upon arrival. This unexpected move is already sending shockwaves through Brazilian producers, exporters, and even within the government itself. Trump didn't make this decision randomly. He claims the trade relationship between Brazil and the U.S. is unfair and says America is at a disadvantage. According to him, Brazil has been benefiting too much from the current trade setup. He also took the opportunity to criticize Brazil's internal politics, referencing actions by the Brazilian Supreme Court and controversies involving political figures. So, besides the economic weight, this tariff carries a clear political undertone, making the situation even more sensitive. But while political leaders exchange statements and accusations, it's the farmers and exporters who are already feeling the financial hit. Because, contrary to what many might think, agriculture doesn't rely solely on weather and soil. It relies heavily on international trade. And the U.S. happens to be one of Brazil's top buyers, especially of beef, sugar, ethanol, honey, fruit, and several other products. Let's look at the numbers. When it comes to sugar, this 50% tariff could cause direct losses exceeding $27 million a year. For ethanol, the impact might reach nearly $91 million annually. And that's just from two products. If we expand the math to Brazil's entire export portfolio to the U.S., the damage becomes even more significant. And unfortunately, that extra cost falls directly on those who produce, the farmers, ranchers, and small exporters. And the consequences are already visible. In central Brazil, several meat processing plants have started suspending exports of beef to the U.S.
Why?
Because with the new tax, Brazilian beef becomes too expensive for American buyers who are now backing out of deals. What was once a profitable supply chain, cattle farmers, truck drivers, meat packers, retailers, has quickly turned into uncertainty and financial loss. Another real example, a Brazilian exporter lost a massive deal of 585 tons of organic honey to the U.S. The order was confirmed, but after the tariff announcement, the American buyer pulled out. The added cost made the product simply too expensive. That meant a full season of production was lost, months of effort and investment wasted. And it's not just honey. Several other sectors are now bracing for impact in the coming weeks. And if you think this issue only affects commodities like beef and honey, think again. A large portion of Brazil's modern agriculture, especially precision farming, relies directly on U.S. technology. Nearly all our advanced equipment like self-driving tractors, farming drones, soil sensors, smart harvesters, and guided planting systems depends on GPS signals. And who controls that GPS? The U.S. government. In other words, if tensions escalate further, even satellite signals could be used as a bargaining chip. We might literally lose our sense of direction. It's a silent dependency, but a serious one. Trump, on the other hand, has been very clear about his goal: pressure Brazil to change its trade policies and maybe even push Brazilian companies to move operations into the United States. He went as far as suggesting that firms opening branches on U.S. soil might be exempted or receive reduced tariffs. It's almost a form of commercial blackmail disguised as economic policy. On top of that, he has threatened to launch international complaints, accuse Brazil of unfair trade practices, and bring cases before the WTO. It's a confrontational stance, with little room left for dialogue. So how has Brazil responded so far? Well, President Lula's administration took a cautious approach. No direct retaliation has been announced, perhaps to avoid triggering a full-blown trade war. But behind the scenes, Brazil's diplomatic and economic ministries are already working. One strategy being considered is to negotiate exemptions, especially for ethanol. Brazil had long been pushing for relief from an 18% tariff the U.S. applies to non-Mercosur countries. Another route is to strengthen trade deals with other nations to reduce dependence on the U.S. But that's easier said than done. It takes time and rarely solves the short-term damage. Meanwhile, diplomacy moves slowly, while financial losses in the fields move fast. And that's not an exaggeration. Agriculture doesn't wait for press conferences or official meetings. Land follows its own rhythm. Cattle follow their cycles. Farmers need to plan ahead. They calculate how much to invest, what they expect to produce, where it will go, and how much they'll earn. It's a system that depends on planning, precision, and confidence. But when a sudden policy hits, without warning, without negotiation, and with a massive 50% cost increase, that system collapses. Predictability, the very foundation of agribusiness, disappears. A producer who had a guaranteed buyer in the US suddenly needs to find new markets. And often, there's no time, no infrastructure, or no logistics to make it work. Uncertainty spreads. No one invests in unstable conditions. No one buys tractors, fertilizers, vaccines, or feed without knowing if they'll be able to sell what they produce. That's when the domino effect begins. Farmers tighten their budgets. Agronomists lose contracts. Ranch hands aren't rehired. Equipment sales stall. And local businesses in rural towns, many of which depend on agriculture, start to feel the pinch. What begins as an export problem quietly turns into a deep, local crisis. Even more concerning is the precedent this sets for the rest of the world. If the United States, one of the biggest players in global trade, unilaterally slaps tariffs on a partner like Brazil, what's stopping Europe or Asia from doing the same? Nothing. In fact, this could encourage similar moves from other nations, creating a climate of mistrust and rising protectionism. And in that scenario, Brazil, currently one of the top food exporters in the world, could find itself increasingly isolated. With containers stuck at ports, products piling up, and farms with nowhere to send their output. That's serious. Because exporting isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. It keeps the economy alive, creates jobs, and brings in vital foreign currency. That's why this tariff goes far beyond a simple trade dispute or a political maneuver. It strikes directly at the heart of Brazilian agriculture, today and in the future. It affects small farmers, medium ones, big producers. It affects truckers, factory workers, ports, cooperatives, logistics companies. It affects the exchange rate, the cost of farm inputs, the price of fuel, shipping rates, and eventually the cost of food on your plate. And it doesn't stop there. It affects national sovereignty too, because a country that can't decide who, how, and when to trade with is vulnerable. A country that relies too heavily on a single export route or foreign technology, like the US-controlled GPS system, could one day be brought to its knees. Today, it's a tariff. Tomorrow, it could be the satellite signal. This moment calls for strategy, cool heads, and long-term vision. Brazil must protect its agricultural sector with strong diplomacy, international partnerships, and diversification. It needs to secure new markets, build stronger ties with Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. But above all, it must reduce dependency, whether in trade, logistics, or technology. Brazil needs to find its own direction, without relying on anyone else's GPS. Because if the land teaches us anything, it's that every harvest begins with the right decision at planting time. And politics works the same way. Those who sow submission reap dependence, but those who sow strategy reap sovereignty. We'll keep watching closely, because the next harvest won't depend only on the rain. Now more than ever, it depends on diplomacy. If you found this content valuable, consider subscribing to the channel, liking this video, and sharing it with those who care about farming and global trade. Spread the word. It only takes a second to send it to your group chats or colleagues. And drop a comment below. What do you think of Trump's new tariff on Brazilian exports? Should Brazil respond forcefully, or take a cautious path to avoid escalation? We want to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.